Hello and welcome to Spokane County Spotlight. I'm Commissioner Al French and my guest today is County Facilities Director Ron Oscarson. And today we're going to discuss some of the history of Spokane County government and especially the county courthouse. Welcome to Spokane County Spotlight, Ron.
Thanks, Commissioner French. It's great to be here.
Great. So let's begin with the establishment of Spokane County as a geographic region. It was first created in 1858, only 6 years after the Washington Territory was identified. But in 1864, Spokane County was absorbed into newly created Stevens County. Then 15 years later, the territorial legislation once again carved out Spokane County and temporarily designated it the village of Spokane Falls as the county seat. During the 1870s, the region experienced a lot of growth, and numerous small communities sprang up, including Cheney, located just west of Spokane Falls. Now, during the county elections of 1880, the question of the county seat was first put to the voters, and there's quite a backstory to this. That's all. So, Ron, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on that?
Sure. After Spokane County had been absorbed or disappeared, many people from Spokane tried to lobby the legislature in the state, we weren't even a state yet, in the territory, to bring Spokane back as a county. So when they finally did that, we just assumed Spokane would be the county seat. Cheney disagreed. There was a vote, somewhat contested, but Cheney won the vote, and from 1880 through 1886, Cheney was the county seat for Spokane County.
That's all very civilized, but there's some local legends about a struggle between the city fathers, and records were stolen and gunshots were fired in the middle of the night. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yes, that is the story. When the vote was counted and Cheney won, Spokane kind of ignored it. There were lawsuits and it went higher up, and Cheney demanded to be the seat. Again, Spokane didn't follow through. In March of 1881, there was a large wedding in Spokane where most of the citizens were at the wedding. History says that citizens of Cheney came and by force took the county records. It appears it was a little more of an inside job. The auditor was there and helped Cheney take the records, but as they fled, there was a guard who fired a couple shots into the air. Not sure what he was firing at or anything, but it wasn't until the morning that they discovered that Cheney had taken the records. Well guarded in Cheney, so that's where the county seat stayed until the next election.
That's incredible. So, whichever story you believe, the county seat returned to Spokane. But where were the official records kept?
Well, the official records did come back in 1886. During that time between 1880 and 1886, gold and silver were discovered in Silver Valley. Spokane was the train stop, tripled in size. So on the second vote, it was a landslide victory for Spokane, and Cheney reluctantly, without struggle, gave up the records, which were brought to the courthouse. So they've been kept there at our courthouse since that time.
So tell us a little bit about Colonel David Jenkins and the role that he played in all of this.
Colonel David P. Jenkins was a Civil War colonel, came to Spokane after the Civil War, is considered the first settler on the north side of the river, signed the charter for Spokane Falls when it became a city. He ultimately donated the property plus $1,000 to build the courthouse. He donated that not long after the election that got Spokane back to the county seat. He also did a number of other things, including starting the first college in Spokane on College Avenue. So quite a founding father for Spokane.
So what happened next?
There was a design contest to build the courthouse. A number of architects, including Kirtland Cutter, went into that design contest. It was won by a person by the name of Willis A. Ritchie, an architect who his only formal training for architecture was a correspondence course in architect.
That's pretty amazing. I know as an architect, it's pretty incredible that he was able to achieve this pretty significant architectural project and stuff. So Ritchie was originally inspired by the Renaissance Revival style of architecture, and you see a lot of those elements in the courthouse right now.
Yes. History says that he patterned it after a chateau in France, which makes the courthouse very unique, especially for Spokane. But not only that, amongst the other courthouses that Ritchie designed throughout the region.
So I know that Colonel Jenkins donated $1,000 toward the construction of the project, but even back then, construction was a little bit more expensive than that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. There was a bond issue floated in 1893 for just under $300,000. It wasn't quite enough. The courthouse at that time, including the jail that was built with it, was $340,000. So that's the total cost to build that magnificent building.
Well, I know back then it was a lot of money and stuff. So was the finished courthouse, was it well received by the community?
Yes, it was. From its first day, it was a source of civic pride, very well liked. Ritchie received many accolades for building the structure. It wasn't all easy for him. There were some issues with the builder, but the finished product we see today was always considered a great courthouse for what Spokane was, a great new city at the time.
Well, this wasn't the only courthouse that Ritchie designed here in the state. There were several others. You want to talk a little bit about those?
Yes, he did 6 courthouses in the state of Washington, and we are the 6th. King County, Clark County, Whatcom County, Thurston County, and Jefferson County all had courthouses built before ours, designed by Ritchie. Sadly, only 2 stand today as courthouses, ours and Jefferson counties. And if you look at Jefferson's, you can see their family. The others were torn down. Thurston County's actually became the state capital for a while, was damaged by earthquake, and the building still stands partially today, the part that they could save after the earthquake. But unfortunately, not many left.
Well, and for those that have been destroyed, and I haven't seen pictures of them, but I can just tell by the design style that Ritchie had that they must have been spectacular structures. And to see that, 4 of the 6 that he designed are no longer with us gives extra value to the fact that we've got one of those 2 remaining courthouses here in Spokane, and it is an iconic landmark for the whole region and stuff. So it's a real tribute to the area. And not only do we appreciate it here locally, but it's also on the state and national historic registers as well, isn't it?
That's correct. We are on both the state and national historic register. This does present some challenges. We want to restore and maintain the character of the building, but it's an 1895 building and it needs to still function today as a center point of government. So that's the challenge.
You mean as great as Ritchie was, he didn't design for internet and cabling? I'm shocked. I mean, no, I'm just kidding. But tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that we do face here, trying to take a building that was built in the 1800s and use it for the 21st century.
Sure. The building has a very unique structure, in particular the floor structure, something that architects, engineers, contractors aren't familiar with today. And so that makes building it and rebuilding it very difficult. That unique structure, along with some past poor projects that weren't done quite right, have left areas of that floor that we really need to do some work to so that they maintain their strength and we can still use them. So we have to be careful in construction projects how we move forward to make sure we don't do further damage, and so that we're done, this building lasts another 100 years.
Well, I know that you're very passionate about the history of the courthouse and its preservation. And as an amateur historian, you have a number of interesting stories about the courthouse and its construction. You want to share some of those, and as well as the tower and even the old jail?
Sure. The history of the courthouse is really a history of the region. It was built during a very prosperous time for Spokane with the mine, so it was really a centerpiece. But there were jailbreaks, even a jailbreak attempt during the construction of the courthouse and jail. In 1896, there was a shooting in the jail between 2 attorneys. There was a hanging in the courtyard, more than one hanging. In fact, the last, considered one of the last hangings in the Washington Territory was done at our courthouse. There were invitations, over 300 invitations sent out to that hanging. And an interesting note of the history, the grandson of that attorney for that person who was hung is still an attorney today in Spokane.
I'll be darned.
So just some facts on how the building really joins with the history of the area.
Well, and I believe here, but is it next week or in a couple of weeks, we are going to be having a dedication for one of the elements of the original courthouse, the gates.
That's correct. The gates stood between the courthouse and the original jail. Inmates would come in through those gates to that courtyard, and that was the courtyard those gates stood in front of that also had the hanging in it. We found those gates with the help of other local historians. They're being restored and put back onto the campus. So that's a real exciting thing for me to see.
That's terrific. Well, and you've brought some historical elements for the courthouse and stuff. You want to talk a little bit about some of the items you brought here?
Certainly. These are items that actually we found in the courthouse over the years that we're trying to save and hang on to. Some odd ones. A whiskey bottle that was found in the walls of a 1940 remodel, so we can only imagine how that got there.
So when you found it, was it full?
Unfortunately, it was not full.
Oh, okay.
It was not. We have a newspaper that was in the courthouse from 1893 that shows, it's the article published that says, "We will build it." So pictures of the design of the courthouse, talking about the design competition, and that we're building it. So to have that actual newspaper is pretty exciting. And there's miscellaneous things from former elected officials that are remembered by their name plaques still around. And just back then when they commemorated buildings, you could get very fancy dinnerware or plates or cups or beer steins. This is one that I actually found online and purchased to make sure it stays here with the courthouse.
Wow, that's incredible.
So some interesting things that we found over the years.
So one of the biggest projects during your time at the county was the replacement of the flagpole on the top of the tower. Why was that necessary?
Well, it was very early in my career at the county. We found that the courthouse flagpole was leaning. Did a lot of research on it, thought it was going to be an easy project. There turned out to be a great deal of structural issues we had to fix. An interesting note on that, when we took down the flagpole, inside the ball on top of the flagpole, we found notes that told us that wasn't the first flagpole. The first one had been struck by lightning in 1919 and removed and replaced. So this actually, the flagpole we put up is the third flagpole. We had to maintain or rebuild most of the tower to get that flagpole to stay, from the nails that were rusting holding the slate on, causing the slate to fall to the ground, to bricks that had been damaged from 100 years of freeze-thaw that needed to be repointed and replaced in the tower. So I'm real excited not only for its beauty, but now for its structural integrity now that we've built it back.
So what else would you like to share about the county courthouse? I mean, it's got a long legacy of interesting stories and stuff. You want to share a couple of those with us?
Well, sure. We can talk about the shooting in the courthouse.
Okay.
There were two attorneys arguing a case of a widow. One attorney suggested that the other attorney may be too close to his client on a personal level. The argument continued out into the hallway, where one attorney started hitting the other attorney with his cane. Second attorney pulled a gun and shot him. The sheriff's office was in the courthouse at the time, but by the time the sheriff got there, the weapon had disappeared. Ultimately, the attorney was acquitted for self-defense. So that happened at the top of what is now the second story of the courthouse. So,
okay.
Fun story on the history.
How about some others?
Sure. It's unfortunate to me that most people don't come to our courthouse happy. You know, people don't come there usually for good things. But it's such a beautiful building that when you come there, you don't recognize some of the things that have happened there. We had a hanging in the courtyard, which is, again, another one of the negatives, but that had a great deal of controversy with it. The person was tried and convicted. Then there was a bedside confession and other issues, and the sheriff resigned, and a new sheriff, and that we're going to have the hanging, we're not going to have the hanging. Finally, they had it in 1900, and all the people that came from Spokane, it became like a picnic event to come and be able to watch it. All the dignitaries were there. Again, that's just a story about the people that go with it. The building of the courthouse, the builder was the former mayor. So there were some issues. Ritchie, who'd been a very successful architect up to that point, despite his young age, sued the builder, the mayor, lost the lawsuit, and history says that he gave up architecture altogether after that. But there are buildings in Spokane that bear his name, where he retired to Spokane, stayed in Spokane, and built buildings through the early 1900s, and he's buried here in Spokane.
So by that history, you know, a lot of folks accuse the city and the county of not having good working relations and stuff, and actually we get along very well, despite what you might read or hear in other places. There's a lot of things that we do together, and we do together very, very well. But this tension dates back to the 18th century then.
That's correct. It was in the papers then.
So it's not any of our fault. I mean, we inherited it, right?
That's correct.
We're going to go with that. Go ahead.
So just some other things about the courthouse. The courthouse was built with a jail that looked just like it behind the courthouse. We still have the tunnels in the basement floor of that jail on our site that we actually maintain and have allowed people to come through and look at. The tower has never been used for anything other than its aesthetics, except for about 3 years we allowed an artist, a local artist, James Levine, to use that tower to do his paintings as part of his studio. And we have a beautiful painting of the courthouse that hangs in our entryway that was painted by Levine. I don't know if the right word is payment, but in payment for us allowing him to use that tower for his studio for those years.
You know, when you go in and try and remodel a building as old as the courthouse, it's not a cheap venture. I mean, it's a very expensive process because you have construction techniques that were used over 100 years ago that those craftsmen aren't available anymore. And so it's a learning experience about how to deal with the different kind of structures and stuff. And so we've ended up investing a lot of money in the restoration of the courthouse, but we've done it in partnership with the state. And it's one of the reasons why the state has been a good partner with us in this effort is because it is a building of statewide significance and that it's one of the 2 original courthouses that are still standing. So we've received quite a bit of money from the state in terms of helping us through a number of different grants that you have authored and championed on behalf of the county. You want to talk a little bit about the financial investment that's been made over the years?
Yes, when we looked at the courthouse and recognized that we needed a lot of work, excuse me, we worked with the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation for the state. They helped us with technical expertise. They helped us with grant funding. The county's required to match, but they really helped us get funding we needed to get moving on these remodels and restoration projects. We're doing it in a phased approach, and as we're going through the courthouse, what people probably see is we're bringing back a lot of the historic character of the building. You can see many of the old brick walls, the bars that were on the windows, those types of things coming back. But in addition, we're doing a great deal of repair to the structure, in particular the floors and walls that are, again, as I mentioned earlier, very unique and very challenging to maintain. We haven't always been good to them in the past. We've set up now that our goal is to really be good to them in the future so that this building stays standing.
Right. Well, and one of the reasons why we're doing the restoration and the remodeling is because we are trying to improve the efficiency of the courthouse and also the usability of the courthouse from the customer standpoint. It's a courthouse because that's where our superior courts are located, and we now have family court and some district court activity. But it is a secured building, and so, you know, we had different departments that the public had to access located on different floors. And so now one of the things we've tried to do is push all of those departments that the average citizen needs to interact with, whether it's the auditor, the treasurer, the assessor's office, all of those we're now locating on the ground floor, so that as the public comes into the courthouse, they just have to go to the ground floor and they can get access to all of these services, as opposed to having to go through the entire courthouse to try and find, okay, where's the auditor at, where's the treasurer at? So it's not just about making the building, maintaining the structural integrity of the building, we're also trying to improve the efficiency of the building as well. And so you want to talk a little bit about some of the remodeling we've done there?
Sure. An 1895 building did not meet ADA criteria. We worked very hard with the State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation to make our courthouse ADA accessible and still maintain its character. So it was very exciting when we got the front of the courthouse back open. Again, not only from the beauty, but the accessibility to the public. As we're remodeling these sections structurally, we're looking at what's the best place and best method to place departments so the public can interact easier. We built a customer service area on the first floor. We'll be finishing that this fall and winter. And so we've made it much easier to do the non-court functions in the courthouse without having to go up and down the stairs, back and forth through security, all in one location. And that allows us to do the same thing with the courts, bring the courts to more an individual location, so that it's a difficult time for people, and the dignity that you want to maintain for those people when they are at the courts can be maintained, not having the public going back and forth through their court proceedings.
Well, and because of the security aspects of the courthouse and stuff, we do have to have monitoring stations for the public. So when you come in, we make sure that you don't have any weapons that would jeopardize the safety of others in the building and stuff. But the main floor of the courthouse wasn't always the only access point into the courthouse. As I remember some of the early drawings, there were actually stairs that took you into the building on the second level as well.
That's correct. And in fact, when the courthouse was first built, what we know today as the first floor was considered the basement. People lived there. A judge lived there. A sheriff lived there. There were complaints from the courts that they could smell food cooking when they were trying to maintain their courts, and they couldn't function properly. In a 1922 remodel, they took those stairs off the side of the courthouse, which were the two main entrances,
Right.
and made the front entrance the actual main entrance like it is today, and people didn't get to live in the first floor of the courthouse anymore after that. It's been used since for government.
Well, and when we had to rebuild the tower, that was kind of a unique construction and stuff, because didn't it have to be restored from the inside as opposed to the typical situation? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there were so many issues with it. Nothing we could find from the past showed us that the tower had ever had scaffolding on it. They actually built it from the inside up and out. Never did they build scaffolding up to haul the bricks. The bricks were hauled up inside by stairs and done in that method. So when we went to restore it, there were areas, parts that hadn't been seen, much less touched, since the building was built in 1895. And when we went to rebuild it, we did have to use a type of scaffolding, but it had to be done very different. So the entire slate part of the roof and all that structure could not be touched by the scaffolding, and we had to effectively work on a 4-story scaffolding within about 2 feet of the building to be able to get all that work done. And that was, I guess from my perspective, one of the most successful parts of the project. Again, people don't get to see that as much, but to know that that structure is done and secure, and that building seen all over town brings me a great deal of pride.
So you've been with the county for how long?
11 years.
11 years. And in this role of being the steward of the courthouse and taking the county through this remodel and everything. But recently, you informed the board of a very sad day that we have in our future, in that you've chosen to go ahead and retire.
Yes, I have.
And this is sad because I can't think of anybody that has been more passionate about maintaining this courthouse for the public, and has even used your own personal time and resources to get the history and to put all of this together. And so one of the reasons for the show is to be able to capture some of the knowledge and some of the stories that you have about the courthouse before you leave. And the board hasn't taken an action on your notice to retire, and so we're not sure we're going to accept it. But I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners, because there is nobody that knows more about this building than you. I'm absolutely confident of that. But the other thing is, I've never seen anybody be as passionate about not only the building, but what the building represents in the history of Spokane County and all of the events and activities and the evolution of that building to get us to where we are now. So I wanted to make sure that I had an opportunity to say thank you on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners and stuff. So all of this, the show, as well as the historical elements that not only does Ron have here, but that has been graphically shown to you, the audience, is going to be on our website. And we're going to try and capture as much history as we can and preserve it for future generations. And a good part of this gathering has been the result of your efforts and stuff. You want to talk a little bit about some of the things you've encountered as you've put together all these issues? Like you spoke a little bit about, you know, just trying to locate the gates. I mean, something simple as that.
Well, first off, thank you, Al, for that. I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to work with this building. I remember as a young kid driving into Spokane for the first time and thinking, boy, this is big city, this is wonderful, and the magic of our downtown and especially our courthouse. So to have the opportunity for that has been wonderful. So yes, thank you, and I intend to, despite retiring, make sure the building is kept up, and whoever is next in the position has that same passion. I hope to keep it going.
Well, my suspicion is that you're going to be nothing more than a phone call away, because your heart and soul is in this building, and that's very clear in terms of how you've conducted yourself and the history you've put together for the citizens of Spokane County on this building. So, but I'm afraid that we're reaching the end of our time, and so I'd like to thank you, County Facilities Director Ron Oscarson, for all that you've done for Spokane County. And also, again, to the audience, I'm Commissioner Al French, and I want to thank you for joining us on Spokane County Spotlight.